opinions expressed on the show are those of the guests or hosts, and not necessarily those of the advertisers, networks, platforms, or stations. Warning that the content of the show may not be suitable for all audiences, and that viewer discretion is advised. The show does not intend to provide medical, legal, or financial advice, and viewers or listeners should consider...
Hello, everybody out there. This is Chad Carey. I'm your host here at Paranormal Intelligence Agency Radio, and we are the radio show that explores all things paranormal, all those crazy conspiracies going on out there in the world, and every once in a while I just have something that doesn't really fit into any box that I bring and present to you guys. But tonight our main topic really ties into a lot of the past episodes that we've done, and something I've alluded to for a while now, which is we're going to talk about the possibility of not aliens here on the Earth per se, but more the idea that there are alien bases on our moon. And I bring that up as a main topic because you guys know that I like to talk about cyber prophecy, and one of the bigger, more bizarre predictions that's been put out there by halfpasthuman.com, Cliff High, and the Webbot is that pretty soon, and by pretty soon I mean within the next, let's say, 12 months or so, people become highly cognizant of the idea that there is an alien presence on our moon. Ties into, really interestingly, into other episodes that I've done. And one of those episodes has to do with Ingo Swann, and the idea that Ingo Swann was approached, and for some of you may not know who Ingo Swann is, you can go back and listen to the episode dealing with Ingo Swann and the alien base on the moon. But Ingo Swann really was sort of the first building block of the CIA's Stargate program, their remote program and remote viewing program. And he recounts in his book, Penetration, the idea that he was approached, and this was like he had to sign some sort of security clearance paperwork, a non-disclosure agreement with the CIA that he wouldn't talk about any of this for 20 years after it happened. But he finally wrote a book in 1999 called Penetration. And in it, he talks about how shady intelligence figures, and we can only assume that they are CIA, approached him and employed him at the tune of what today would be right around $7,000 a day. They were paying Ingo Swann to remote view what they believed to be an alien structure on the moon. It in fact proved to be so through his remote viewings. And that features into tonight in a really interesting way into our topic, because we have all of these different avenues. There's been some other interesting news before we start our main topic for this evening, but I wanted to touch on Dogman as well tonight. We had some feedback from last show in which I brought up Dogman, and people always want me to elaborate on this or that, so we'll get to that. But wanted to bring up the drones. That was also part of a past episode. Listen, guys, the drones are still out there. They're still flying. And it was part of a very interesting conspiracy theory for a while that the drones were in fact being employed or being operated by the COG, or the Continuation of Governance Command. And people don't realize that here in the United States, we have something put in place where you have what are called emergency powers. And if those emergency powers get ratcheted up enough in the face of an overwhelming threat of some kind, then what ends up happening is the COG just automatically kicks in. The Continuation of Governance Command is what it's called, or NORCOM is its other name. And the idea was that the COG was trying to preempt the inauguration of Donald Trump, and they were going to do this by perpetrating a false alien invasion using really second generation drone technology. This is some of this drone technology may in fact be anti-gravitic, and some of it may be ours, and some of it may not be ours. What ends up, or what I think is interesting, is that the inauguration has taken place. So clearly, if that was the goal, the end goal of some kind, then they failed, right? But the drones are still flying. So that leads me to believe that really the conspiracy theory about the drones actually just being our drones, and the fact is that the people that are able to control our drones, that are in control of our drones, are sending them up night after night after night in order to confuse the public from what otherwise they would be reporting as authentic alien activity in our skies. There's a lot of real UFO activity taking place right now. And what better way to cover that up than to send out 1 million drones every night? And anytime somebody says, no, I saw an alien craft, it immediately gets dismissed as one of the mysterious drones. Well, that's interesting because just today, Trump made some statements about the drones and how he was getting to the bottom of what was going on. And that's going to be an interesting development going forward. So, in other news, where kind of conspiracy theory is rampant right now, is the LA fires. And that really coincides with something that was predicted over at the webbot called Blue Wars. The conspiracy theory is that there are government elements that are able to use directed energy beams coming from space that are able to ignite these fires and cause all of this damage in the hopes of reclamation, of being able to reclaim those lands, build high-rise buildings and stuff like that. It's an interesting conspiracy theory. What I find interesting about that theory is that the webbot predicted that people become cognizant of these high energy beams and they begin to paint their houses blue because the color blue apparently repels the high density microwaves or whatever it is that they're using. So high pressure microwaves. But that's interesting because I've come across a number of different photographs taken by people after the LA fires in which there were structures that were either painted blue or cars that were blue and which were not burned up at all. So take that for what it's worth. But it is interesting. It really is. So last week we touched on dogmen, and that's one of the favorite topics out there in paranormal world. You know, it's the dogman mystery is an interesting mystery because it goes back into really prehistory if you really trace the origins, and a lot of that information you can find in my new book, which is Dogman Legend Meets Science, a field investigator's guide to the dogman mystery, and you can find that on Amazon. it was something sorely needed in the dogman investigation world, from someone that's actually investigated a lot of dogman cases. And there's some interesting things that I didn't cover when I was talking about dogman last week, just because really it's a topic in and of itself a lot of times. Of course, there's a lot of shows that just cover dogman encounters, like between the witness, what they say that they saw, etc. But I kind of like to look at it from a more macro perspective and see if we can glean any more details from the mystery. And really, when you're investigating the dogman mystery, the modern day sort of ignition of the mystery, if you will, really began in Wisconsin and on Bray Road. And it was the book The Beast of Bray Road that really sort of began a movement in the paranormal world of lots and lots of different eyewitnesses coming forward. And I talk about this at Bigfoot conventions, that you can literally basically remove the head of the animal with Bigfoot and with dogman. And on paper, what you're left with are two pretty much identical mysteries. You have two creatures that shouldn't really exist by any sort of normal biological processes. You have long-running historical oral histories regarding those creatures. Both of those creatures are regarded by indigenous people as being spiritual or somehow connected to the star people. You have non-stop trace evidence being left by these creatures at the scenes where they are encountered with humans. And you are experiencing a non-stop and ever-growing body of highly credible eyewitnesses who not only report the incident, but then seemingly in a number of cases go on to make somewhat profound life changes according to what occurred to them, what happened to them, their encounter with the dogman. And in my investigations, whenever you come across a witness who thereafter begins to make profound life changes because of what they encountered, you know you've got an authentic witness of some kind, because there's no way you're going to come face to face with a phenomenon like that and it not affect you deeply and disturb you deeply and psychologically. It just won't happen. So all of you would-be dogman investigators out there, check out my manual on investigating the dogman mystery. It covers a lot of the history of what's been reported in the past, as well as modern day, what's needed modern day for us to finally prove the mystery once and for all. New technologies that are being developed, new ways of collecting DNA, etc., are all included. And it's something that's been sorely needed in the mystery itself. But getting back to Bray Road, I've long observed in the dogman mystery the same thing that I've observed and wrote about in my book Bigfoot Unleashed, is this weird apparent ET connection to both of these creatures. And by that I mean that in either case, there's a number of good cases out there where the eyewitnesses report either seeing a unexplained alien craft of some kind or an anomalous light of some kind accompanying that phenomenon. So much so that I even entertained the notion once upon a time that maybe these creatures are alien avatars, if you will. I mean, what better avatar to move through the wildernesses of the world than a creature built like either one of these creatures? And I've long held the belief that in at least the case of the dogman, we have to be looking at a chimera creature of some kind. And that would be a creature that's, a genetic fusion of two different species, done on a scale that we can barely even comprehend as the human species goes. But the other thing I found interesting was that there was a documentary that was put out, little known though it is. And in that documentary, they feature the farmer who literally owns the land that runs alongside Bray Road. That was a very enlightening interview that they had with this gentleman, because I think it shines a lot of light on the origins and gives us the mystery is. And he not only had witnessed the beast of Bray Road, a dogman, on his property a number of times, but he found footprints, and he had enough activity that he decided to plant cameras in his field and bait the creature with a freshly killed deer carcass. Now, first of all, the footprints that he found differ from a lot of reported dogman footprints. And that's something I've discovered in investigating the dogman phenomenon. The footprints are not always identical. In fact, they rarely are. That's different than the Sasquatch phenomenon. And in the case of the farmer at Bray Road, the footprints he discovered have 5 toes but 7 pads. That's highly genetically unusual. So he decides he's going to try to get this thing on camera, and so he plants all of these cameras all through his fields and, baits one of them. What's interesting is that the night that he baited this thing, the camera is actually looking, panned on the deer in the foreground, and off in the background you can see a mist begin to form. That mist slowly creeps towards the camera. It covers over the deer, and when the mist dissipates, the deer carcass is completely gone. That's interesting. He also had a number of cattle mutilations, and these were classic cattle mutilations, not the kind that would be caused by a wolf-like creature. But most shockingly of all, what he caught on his cameras was a profound amount of what appeared to be UFO activity above his fields. And so I've asked the question ever since that bit of information and evidence has come in, and with eyewitness testimony putting UFOs at the scene of a lot of dogman encounters, what are we looking at here? Why is it that this ET presence would be using a chimera creature like that on the ground, and for what purpose could it possibly solve? And why would you go to the efforts to introduce a creature like that into the ecology of the planet? Those are all questions I ask and confront in my new book, Dogman Legend Meets Science. So anyway, we had some feedback about that, and I thought it would be important for us to kind of cover that. The dogman enigma is really interesting because you have all of these physical encounters nonstop being reported, yet we have very few, if any, reliable encounters where somebody was injured and reported the injury. For instance, we've never had a case that I am aware of where somebody was horribly mauled by a dogman and survived to tell the tale, and maybe the ones that attack humans are so vicious and so, good at killing that those are the people, some of them, that disappear in the wilderness areas of North America. That's something that's also been postulated and out there. But wanted to bring up a little bit of paranormal in the news before our break, and then we're going to tackle the interesting topic of aliens on the moon and what that might mean for us. But Expedition Bigfoot is out there. There's been a lot of Bigfoot shows. Let's be honest, and some of them have not been so great. Expedition Bigfoot promises to kind of turn the corner on all of that, and they've come up with some pretty interesting evidence. Let's face it, and they are extremely well funded, and I'm quite familiar with a world famous Bigfoot investigator who knows their tracker personally, by personally I mean they're close personal friends, and assures me that there is a high amount of credibility on that show, and that their tracker, who's Russell Accord, is top notch. So if he's the real deal, then the rest of that crew has to be the real deal. And they've investigated or uncovered in their investigation some very interesting things. And they're using an advanced algorithm to sort of predict where they can have the highest probabilities of encounters at any given date on the calendar. That's fascinating to me. Technology may be catching up. But there's other articles out there. A lot of them are about the Loch Ness Monster. Again, they think they're declaring that the Loch Ness Monster mystery has been solved. I can guarantee you it has not. And it won't be until one of those animals' carcasses washes up on the shores of the loch that people will finally accept the possibility that those creatures are real. As I've said in the past, I believe that the loch is a spawning pool for these plesiosaur-like creatures who somehow survived the ending of the last ice age. And I think they make their way into the loch from underground water-filled channels and slowly make their way back out to sea after they're done doing what they do there. So a lot of other things are out there. There has been a whistleblower come forward, another one making all of the headlines, including at News Nation. Check that out. And he claims that he was one of the main guys the U.S. government used as a helicopter pilot to retrieve downed alien craft. And I might as well mention that Stephen Greer is out there and has been talking a lot on Twitter, not only about this coming major data dump and team of whistleblowers apparently coming forward from one of the deep black special access programs that have these alien craft. But he's saying that our intelligence services for a very long time now have had a weapon capable of bringing down a UFO. It somehow disrupts the propulsion system using directed energy beams of some kind. And they may have discovered that because they think that some of the radar that was being used at Roswell, when the Roswell crash occurred, actually may have interrupted the propulsion system. And maybe it was that fact that they were able to develop something where they can down craft and then recover them. So that would explain the large number of craft that have been reportedly recovered over the course of 80 years now. But after our break, guys, we're going to come back. We're going to talk about get back to the moon. We talked about dogmen, and why not talk about the full moon and what might be happening on the other side? And will this whole thing become part of your everyday waking normal life. In other words, is the webbot right? Will the headlines read aliens on the moon? And will you and everybody that you know become so cognizant of that fact that it begins to alter your daily life? And we'll get back to that right after our break.
Not on my watch, our military service members say, as they volunteer to serve. Not on my watch, they say, as they leave their families behind to keep the rest of ours safe. As they move out, stand firm, and take fire. So not on our watch, we say, to the severely ill or injured veterans who can't get the care they deserve, the therapists they need to walk again, the treatment they need to talk again, the lifetime of day-to-day help they need to live full and independent lives. When there's no more government funding, or a nursing home seems like the only option, or everyone says there's no hope for recovery, we won't leave one warrior behind. Not on our watch. Find out how you can do your part at findwwp.org.
In deep dark wood where shadows lie, Bigfoot sleeps with piercing eyes, footprints large in the silent night, a beast untamed, it's out of sight. Dogman howls at the creeping moon, sharp teeth flashing come too soon, through the fog in a misty blur, a chilling ground your blood does stir. Strange creatures on a restless night, disappear with the fading light. Time slips takes out of time, mysteries in the forest ride. Wonder where the pines grow tall, echoes from another age call. Time bends twist in the whispering leaves, who knows what love, what deceit. Lost in fog we drift away, different world in the light of day. Past and present blend as one, in the forest where there's no sun. Ghostly visions they come and go, secrets hidden we may not know. Dormant flowers, Bigfoot roams, in these woods they make their home. Strange creatures on a restless night, disappear with the fading light. Time slips, takes all its time. Mysteries in the forest ride. Rise. Wonder where the pines grow tall, echoes from another age call. Time bends twist in the whispering leaves, who knows what the forest ride. Mysteries in the forest ride. Wonder where the pines grow tall, echoes from another age call. Time bends twist in the whispering leaves, who knows what lurks, what deceives. Lost in fog we drift away, different world in the light of day. Past and present blend as one, in the forest where there's no sun. Ghostly visions they come and go, secrets hidden we may not know. Dogman prowls, Bigfoot roams, in these woods they make their homes.
everybody. We're back on the air, and we have been discussing, by the way, this is Jack, and this is Paranormal Intelligence Agency Radio, in case you're just joining us. But we've been discussing the interesting topic of Dogman before we're getting into the aliens on the moon. And so, you know, what two better topics go together than moons and dog-headed, upright running creatures, right? And there may be an ET connection between the two, which is all the more interesting given the fact that we have been given the cyber prophecy prediction that within our very near future, people on the fair people of the planet Earth will become very compelled with the idea that we are not alone and that the aliens have set up quite a shop on our moon and that they appear to be mining our moon. People always say, well, why would an advanced civilization want to mine our moon? Well, our moon is a vast source of what's called helium-3, and helium-3 has been long predicted to be the ultimate power source. In fact, it could fuel all of our efforts to reach the stars as a species if they don't take it all first. So I was discussing Ingo Swann earlier and how the CIA utilized his natural psychic abilities. And at the time that they employed him to remote view different coordinates on the moon, he had approached an accuracy rate in his remote viewing under laboratory conditions at Stanford, a rate of 65% accuracy. And it was at that stage they decided to employ him to remote view for them some coordinates on the moon, and they obviously knew that there was something there. Whether that was from an orbiter of some kind that took pictures of what they ended up having him remote view, nobody really knows. But what we do know is that in one of the craters that he came across in his remote viewing, he noticed a vast number of buildings. And one of those buildings emitted a green glow to it. And as he approached the building in his mind's eye, he could notice that there were portals, there were little windows in this building, and he began to peer through one of them, and he saw humanoid-ish aliens. He didn't really describe them like the little grays, which I found interesting, but said that they were human-like, but not human. And that one of them eventually takes notice of him or his consciousness being at the window of the building and begins to look at him through the window. And then 2 and 3 turn and begin to look, and then a dozen. And all of a sudden he's telling his handler, his CIA handler, Axelrod, what's happening. And Axelrod tells him, come away from there. Come away from there right now. And so he did. And through another conversation, Axelrod says, your mission is complete. You can go home tomorrow. And that was really interesting and might be interesting enough, except for later on, Axelrod approaches Ingo Swann and asks him the amazing question, would you like to see a UFO? And of course, Ingo Swann says yes. This leads to a trip into the far north. He thought it was probably Alaska. They kept him in the dark as far as where they were flying him, but they flew him to a place he thought was Alaska. They then hiked into a lake, a mountain lake, and waited for a long while. It was at this stage that one of the 2 military people that were with he and Axelrod, and these were 2 twins, he said, which I think that's interesting. made a little hand gesture, and then Axelrod tells him, "Get ready, it's about to happen." And the UFO comes up out of the water of this lake, hovers above it, shoots little lightning bolts off into the forest in different areas. Axelrod tells him, "Be very still. They can detect heat and movement like crazy." Then they apparently get targeted because one of the twins tells them to move very quickly, and they did. And right as they did, one of these lightning bolts struck where they had been seated. And so they took off into the forest. And as they're leaving, Ingo Swann looks back and he sees that the UFO is sucking up a vast amount of water into the bottom of the craft. And then he's out of sight. They make it back to the van, and he gets a sudden psychic impulse of exactly what he had witnessed. And he turns to Axelrod and he says, "That was an unpiloted drone craft, and it was on a resupply mission. They need our water." And by day, he was talking about the aliens that he had remote viewed on the moon. So here is Ingo Swann getting two good glimpses into what appears to be an alien operation taking place on the moon, and that it is in fact a mining operation of some kind. So that's interesting, because that leads us into many, many years later. I mean, Ingo Swann's book was published in 1999, and it's not until really 2021 that the Webbot begins to predict that not only is there an alien presence on the moon, but that fact becomes widely known across the planet, and leads to, I might add, a conflict. There is in fact a conflict taking place, and that conflict is going to get pretty heated over the coming years. It leads to what the Webbot predicts as being a forced interaction of some kind. The ETs basically come down and say, "Hey, what are you guys doing here?" You know. So I find that interesting, this prediction of a conflict, because it wasn't so many years ago that we had our great team at NASA drop a nuclear weapon onto the surface of the moon. Now, at the time, they said it was all in an effort to map the moon. Needless to say, they were very surprised because the moon rang like a bell, like it was hollow inside. But I would propose that, given the insights from the Webbot and from other insiders, that that may have been part of the conflict that's taking place. What if they had targeted some sort of alien structure that was a potential threat of some kind? It's quite possible. But everybody out there knows who Bob Lazar is. And, you know, Bob Lazar has really been vindicated in a lot of minds out there that are involved in paranormal and ufology research. And the reason why is because a lot of what he said in his original testimonies has all been verified now from other whistleblowers, including David Grush, who claims that not only have craft been recovered, but biologics within those craft, as he puts it. In other words, there were alien bodies in those craft. So I bring up Bob Lazar because not only did he out Area 51, and not only has he been vindicated in his testimony, but he claimed that some of the craft that he saw, he was told and had read in reports that they had given him, were in fact recovered on the moon. That's very interesting because we have an ongoing idea out there, a meme, a conspiracy theory, long-running conspiracy theory about the reality of a secret space program that's being operated by, well, elements of the United States government. It appears as though there was a secret space program running before the secret space, or before the Space Force was initiated by Donald Trump. How those two programs are coexisting right now in space with one another is something of great interest to me. I'm not sure how one can be reconciled with the other, because the secret space program, according to conspiracy theory, has extremely advanced, back-engineered alien-type craft that they've hidden from the world forever. How are they going to explain those craft to a bunch of newly trained Air Force astronauts that started the Space Force? It doesn't, one of those things is going to have to give. And it makes me wonder what kind of behind-the-scenes drama we're missing right now, considering all of that. But it brings to mind Bob Lazar, because a few recovered craft from the moon, it implies, of course, that we've had many unknown or secret lunar operations take place, and some of those were sophisticated enough that they were able to either fly back or somehow bring back alien craft from the surface of the moon. So, there is a guy out there I recommend everybody check out his YouTube channel. He's called Bruce Sees All, and he's somebody that I find entertaining because he's got extremely advanced telescopes. He must be an astronomer of some kind, but they're always trained on the moon, and he posts a lot of very clear UFO activity taking place on the surface of the moon. I'm surprised they have not shut him down yet. By the way, come by and check out my YouTube channel. It's just on YouTube under Jack Carey. Like and subscribe. There are close to 90 videos on there now for you guys to binge watch, and every one of them covers a different kind of paranormal topic. So yeah, come by and check it out. It's just under Jack Carey, Cary. So leave your comments below the videos and let me know what it is you would like to hear about. But I bring up the secret space program because we have not only Bob Lazar saying, yeah, these UFOs, they brought them back from the moon, but we have in the testimony of a enigmatic British hacker named Gary McKinnon, who suffers from Asperger's syndrome, which actually aided in his ability to be a computer hacker, I think. He was sort of a hacking savant until he got caught by the NSA and by NASA, hacking into their computer systems. But before that happened, before he got caught, he was able to download photographs of very large spacecraft that had the words USS written on the side. And along with that, an entire document that was labeled non-terrestrial officers with a long list of names that were human. I think that's interesting because a long time ago in my research, I came across an article from, I believe, 1986, Los Angeles Times front page. They ran an article talking about America's secret space program and the fact that at that time they had already had 38 trained astronauts in this program. And then you didn't hear anything about it. And that was 1986, Los Angeles Times. So people have very, very short memories. And it's easy to perpetrate things like they've gotten away with for the last 80 years when people have such short memories. And they expect everybody to, I suppose, keep them honest, and they're just not being honest. There's too much at stake. So I will be releasing a new book, and it's called Our Alien Moon. That has a lot of information regarding what was discovered on the moon, and it'll be much more comprehensive than what I'm talking about this evening. So for people that really want to deep dive into the subject, I found that now with the WebBot predictions and with confirmation from various remote viewers that there's an alien presence on the moon, that it was a timely time to put out a book on the subject, and it differs from all the other books that are out there so far. I'll let you know when it's out and about, but it's pretty close. Again, it's going to be called Our Alien Moon, and I hope you like it. But it's interesting because when you go back into even ancient history regarding the moon, you have the Sumerian accounts of the Anunnaki. And the Anunnaki were apparent space aliens that interacted with the people of Sumeria and really introduced civilization into at least that part of the world at that time. Some people believe it was a worldwide civilization at some point. But I bring up ancient Sumeria because, they discovered 500,000 stone tablets in cuneiform writing at the Palace of Ashurbanipal. And those tablets told us every little tiny detail. They detail every little thing about Sumerian life, beliefs, cosmology, mathematics, you name it. And in some of their cosmology, you come across an interesting line, and it says that mankind was born in sin, right? Something that you come across much later in the Bible. The interesting thing, however, about this particular account is that the word, as it's translated, sin, S-I-N, in English, actually was the word for moon in Sumerian. So in other words, they were saying mankind was actually developed on the moon, which I find interesting given the fact that we have all of these accounts of the ancient Anunnaki having not only constructed genetically modern day humans, and the idea that Ninkar-Sag, who was the wife of one of the Anunnaki brothers who were in charge of ruling the planet, was a genetic scientist. And it could very well be that what you have on the moon are structures that were left by the Anunnaki, and that were later repurposed by another kind of alien intelligence. Wouldn't that be strange if that were the case? Now, there are ancient accounts, written accounts, that go back into really maybe the end of the last ice age, recopied for thousands of years, talking about a time when the Earth perhaps did not even have a moon. I find that really interesting, and there is a lot of evidence to support the crazy idea that the moon may not in fact be at all what it appears to be, and that it may in fact be a construction of some kind. And I asked the question, what would it take? What motive would it take for an advanced civilization to construct something like our moon and then park it into place in such a way that it can interact with the Earth the way that it does? That's really, really interesting to me. But that takes us back to NASA and their nuclear weapon, and why they would drop a nuclear weapon onto the surface of the moon in order to map it, only to have it ring hollow. And are we talking about a completely hollow moon, or is there vast caverns? And what about all of the crazy statements that were made by some of our astronauts, presumably, regarding flashes of light that they saw as they orbited the dark side of the moon? And what would the motive be of an alien species like that trying to conceal themselves on the dark side of the moon? That is all the questions. These are all questions that we're going to have to sort of wrestle with if, and it's a big if, but if in fact the Webbot and Cyber Prophecy, the remote viewers et al. Are accurate in their predictions of all of this taking place, then these are questions that are going to become forefront to us in society. You can imagine the societal upheaval if they just had full disclosure. The kind of societal change that would create in religion and politics and everything. You name it. It'll have profound implications once full disclosure takes place. Imagine how much more dramatic that change will be when people accept the idea that not only are we not alone, but there's a vast operation of them right on our moon, taking whatever they want, whenever they want. That's what we're talking about. That's been predicted this whole time. And like I said, look forward my new book about all of this, Our Alien Moon. I actually went back and I researched a lot of ancient history regarding the moon and the mysteries of the moon and what people were thinking about and talking about with the moon. And interestingly enough, I found accounts going all the way back to Galileo where TLP, or translunar phenomenon, as they like to refer to it, was reported. So humanity has a long history of not only seeing really strange things on the moon, but now apparently we're going to come face to face with some of those very things. And let's see here. Next week, we'll be talking about more about the Bigfoot mystery. We're going to revisit the Bigfoot mystery and present some interesting evidence. I'm going to talk about a lot of interesting evidence that a lot of people today in the Bigfoot community are unaware of, having to do with a lot of things that were, a lot of evidence that was recovered in the past that went into the genome, the Sasquatch Genome Project, etc. And we're going to talk about the overall state of the mystery. Where are we today? Because in a lot of the cryptid animal pursuits, let's call that, everything from the chupacabra to Bigfoot to dogman to other creatures, Mothman, etc., it seems like cryptozoology creeps up to a point on the phenomenon, and we're almost on the cusp of finally proving one of these creatures to be real and living, breathing, and breeding in our reality. And then we seem to hit a wall. And it seems to happen time and time again. So I'm going to talk about the 3 circles of cryptozoology, what those 3 circles are, and how they're used to bring about the conclusion to cryptozoological mysteries if they're used properly. And with that, guys, that's another episode of Paranormal Intelligence Agency Radio. Just please join me next week, and we'll talk about some interesting stuff. I'll see you then.
Throughout America, there are sanctuaries beyond the city limits.